This video is a free preview from Vespers' Creative Mastery online course. This course is the result of 10 years of research Vespers did into the creative process and how to fully tap into your potential as an artist. If you're looking to build your own unique sound, find sources of limitless inspiration, and discover how to blast through creative roadblocks that are holding you back, this course is worth looking at. To learn more about creative mastery, check out the info below.
Hello everybody. I'm here in the studio today with ill.Gates, aka Dylan. Dylan was one of the first people back in the day that ever actually showed me anything about writing music, and he has since become a really prolific music producer in the bass music scene and also in the field of Ableton education and music production in general. A lot of you might know him already from his website, the ill.Methodology, and the training programs that he's done while he tours. So he's been gracious enough today to come and join us. He just rocked a gig in Victoria last night, and yeah, he's going to join us for a bit today to talk about the creative process. So thanks for joining us, buddy.
Hey, no problem. How's it going, everyone? It's good to see you all again, and it's great to be here with Drew. Drew's a very old, very good friend of mine, and I'm really very impressed by what he's accomplished lately, and Warp Academy and all that cool stuff is just really popping off. So it's great to be here and to be a part of what you've got going on here, and it's a good day. Today's a good day.
Nice.
Feeling it.
Sweet. Well, we got a good list of questions to cover. This interview is part of an online course that we're doing through Warp Academy on the creative process, and Dylan in his program, the ill.Methodology, speaks to this a lot. And one of the things that I've loved about what he offers is he does a lot of research, and he relates research to the creative process in a way that a lot of people don't. They just don't make that connection. And he's brought a lot of really shocking and counterintuitive research to the field that has blindsided me in a lot of ways and really impressed me. So we're going to be covering lots of weird and crazy things. The conversation's going to go a lot of interesting directions. And we're going to start off with creative blockages. And as musicians and artists, there are things that just screw us over. Things that we encounter that a lot of us share in common that just stop us in our tracks. And I'm wondering if you could just cover what some of those big ones are that have come up for you, and then we can talk about maybe how to get past them.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the main mistake that I think a lot of people make is feeling like they're alone when they have these creative blockages. And basically, every person, your art might be unique, and what it is that you have to say might be unique, and your life might be unique, but humans are really very similar to each other, especially when it comes to breaking through these creative blockages and getting in touch with ourselves. Most of us have just not really given ourselves permission to truly be ourselves, and that kind of comes from the fact that we're social animals, and we're used to growing up in these small tribes of 100 people in a cave or whatever, and if you don't get along with people and you seem weird to them, well, you might have to go find yourself another cave, and that would suck, right? But right now, that's not a pressure anymore, and you have to break through a lot of these kind of deep-seated biological needs to conform and be boring and to think what everybody else thinks so that you can get along with them. You don't have to do that anymore. That's just not our world anymore, and it's a real challenge to look at our world today and to really say, hey, I'm going to be an individual. I'm going to trust my own opinion. I'm going to have my own ideas, and I'm okay with other people not liking them. And really learning to have the faith in yourself to just let go of the fear of what other people think of you. You're not going to get kicked out of the cave. You're just not. That's not an issue anymore. So it's really, that's the number one thing. And most people have this idea, and they don't even really give themselves permission to think truly creatively. They look around themselves and they say, okay, well, what's working for other people? What can I take from that? And being realistic, what can I make from that? And really, if you sit around thinking realistically and basing your life on, what your parents or your priest or your teacher or whatever tells you to do, and you end up with a boring ass life, it's your own fault. It really is. You gotta question that shit, and you gotta really, give yourself permission to be like, hey, I'm gonna be me. I'm gonna do some crazy things. People are not gonna like all of them, and that's totally okay. And that's the number one, is the fear of what other people think. And if I had spent my entire life being realistic, I would still be living in my hometown and have some job that I don't like, doing graphic design, while I go out on the weekend and DJ for free beer for people who don't like my music. But over the years, I eventually learned to be like, hey, it is okay to dream big. It is okay to do things that are completely outside of the box. It is okay to take risks. And one of the things that really gave me permission to take those risks was reading about this guy, Seth Godin, who is just, if you don't know Seth Godin, you need to know Seth Godin. But he makes the point in his book, The Purple Cow, which is mandatory reading.
Yeah.
But he makes the point in The Purple Cow that basically one of the riskiest things you can do right now is to play it safe. Because if you do play it safe, you're going to be boring. And nobody likes boring music. They don't. Okay? You need to be able to rock the boat in some way. And if you're not making at least a handful of people angry, you're not being creative enough. And that's one of the just magical, crazy things about art, is that art has the power to make people angry. And, you need to want to make people angry. You need to want to make people not like you. That's an important thing. It's a very important thing, because if you try and make everybody like you all the time, you're going to make bland, watered down, boring crap that's going to be maybe palatable to people 5 years ago, but things move so fast now that if you're not a trendsetter, you're not relevant. You're just not. Musically, nobody cares, and I mean, the people that you want to, just economically, from if you are pursuing a career as a professional musician, the people who buy tickets are young people. And young people want to listen to music that says to the world, hey, I'm different from you. I'm me. I belong to this tribe that is different from your tribe. You guys are old and stuffy and boring with your whatever. And this is my crazy new thing that me and my friends like, and we're cooler than you. That's what young people want. And, by the time you learn how to produce music with any degree of skill, usually you've probably been listening to music for longer than a lot of people who are going to be buying your tickets. And the things that were maybe new and edgy and different 5 years ago when you started making music are now no longer new and edgy and different. And, your influences are no longer relevant, and your audience aren't going to have nostalgia for early 90s breakbeat hardcore or whatever it is that you were super into when you were coming up and young and impressionable and stuff. And it's cultivating that ability to remain young and impressionable and to have a craving for what's different is really, really tough. So, whatever it is that you got to do to break through that, it's different for different people. I find, actively trying to piss people off is a great way. And when I'm working on a track, I'm like, who is this going to make angry? And if it's not going to make anybody angry, I'm like, I don't know if I need to do this. I don't know if I need to do this. You need to be ready to have people not like you, and you need to be ready to make some people angry. And if you can break through those fears, then, the world is yours creatively. And really, musically, so many people are talented. So many people are very, very talented musicians. They can play instruments fabulously, can do all these things. And music isn't necessarily about talent, especially not when it comes to being a professional musician. It's much more about having the right kind of attitude and the right kind of strength of character to be like, hey, you know what? Fuck what you think. I'm an individual. This is me. And like it or not, I don't care. And that ability to just not give a fuck what people think is something that people gravitate to, even if your music sucks. Even if your music totally is just like, just trash, right? People will be like, wow, that person has the strength of character to buck the trends and be a trendsetter, even if it's a ridiculous trend. You know, the fact that they have the strength of character to be a trendsetter and to be a truly creative person and make something new, that's what people are going to gravitate to. Not necessarily the art itself, but that person's strength of character, you know, and really cultivating that in yourself is so important. And I mean, if there's one thing that I could just like go back to myself in the past, I would just be like, man, these people that you're looking up to right now that, you know, are kind of like rolling their eyes at your weird take on things and trying to hold you back from getting DJ gigs, every one of them is going to be like, you know, working as an accountant or a collections agent or something in 10 years, and you're going to be fucking laughing. You know, and if I could just say, like, look, man, none of their opinions matter. Like, your opinion's the one that matters. You're the one that's going to make it, not them. You know, and if I could have gone back and said that to myself, man, I could have saved myself so many boring songs. Like, my first alias, God, I made a lot of boring music, you know, and I wouldn't have had to do that. You know, I could have just plunged right into being myself now. But, you know, instead I was like, oh, you know, how can I make what it is that I have to offer palatable? How can I dumb things down? How can I make things more bland? And that's just like, it's you're shooting yourself in the foot. So really just let it go. Let it all go. Don't care what people think. You know, your friends, you might think they have great taste in music, but you know, that's their opinion. You know, it's your opinion that matters. Learn to, you know, really embrace that and just not give a fuck, because that's really the number one.
So for you, I wanted to ask you, thanks for that, Dylan.
Yeah, sorry, that was a bit
awesome.
Ranty, but you know, whatever.
It's okay. There's gems in there. Yeah. It's all good.
Okay.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you is, for yourself, like, you have a past where you were more trying to tone your stuff down, trying to blend in, trying to fit in, and that's a natural instinct. I think relating things back to the tribe is totally on the right path, because we used to be part of these little, tiny tribes, and fitting in became really important.
Oh yeah, you die. You get kicked out of the cave.
Not fitting in, we're death.
Yeah.
Death, basically. So now we live in a very different world, but that fear still remains. This primal fear is still there, and it rules so much of what we do, especially as artists. So understanding that we need to move past that, and that fear is irrational, and we can let it go. Understanding that rationally is one thing, and then actually doing that is a different journey. And I expect it's probably different for different people, but for you, was there one or two pivotal moments for you where you found yourself taking that step into accepting yourself and accepting your own uniqueness and being confident about saying, hey, here's my stuff?
I mean, a lot of it was just time and just watching the people that were giving me this just terrible advice just fail. Watching them fail was huge, right? But, you know, I mean, exercises in nonconformity are very, very important, and they can be really easy. Like, I don't know if you've ever read any Tim Ferriss, but Tim Ferriss is one of my heroes. He's one of my heroes. And he has some amazing exercises in his book for giving yourself permission to think, you know, completely outside of the norm.
You're talking about the laying down on the floor.
Yeah, the laying down in public spaces. If you just if you go to a public space and just lie down on the ground in a crowded group of people, people will be mystified by the fact that you're doing that. Or like face the other way in an elevator, you know, and just see what people do, you know, and just like, it can be really fun, you know, like you can just like, you know, go out with a bunch of your friends and just go cause some public mayhem just for the hell of it. And you'll find that there are, you know, I mean, as long as you're reasonable about it, you don't do anything illegal, you'll find that there are actually very little real world consequences to nonconformity. Like almost zero. You might have someone yell something about your weird haircut out of a car window here and there. But
not that you've ever heard that.
No, I've never. No one's ever yelled anything weird at me out of a car window. But yeah, I mean, just do something weird in a public area. That's one of the best things. Because frankly, if you're gonna get up on stage, you're gonna be acting weird in public a lot. So you got to get used to it, right? But doing weird things in public is a really good thing. I often try to just make music that I've just like never heard anything like it before. And when and I mean, granted, I haven't released a lot of this stuff because a lot of it's just far too weird. But if you say, okay, as soon as I can name something that this sounds like, that part has to be deleted or that idea has to be deleted, and just trying to genuinely create something totally new and being like, okay, what do I normally do and how can I do the opposite of that? Things like that are really great. But yeah, definitely like I remember once as kind of an exercise in doing this, I was living in Kensington Market in Toronto, which is kind of like the hippie bohemian artist neighborhood, and the power was out, and I had a gig that night, and I was trying to practice, and I was like, well, I don't have any electricity, so that's not working, and I was like, well, what do? I was like, well, shit, I better bust out the acoustic guitar. So I got out my acoustic guitar, and I know like C and A and G, so I was like, okay, I'm going to take those 3 chords, and I'm going to write a song about how the power went out of my house today. And I wrote this song about how the power went out at my house, and I went out to this gig at this bar, and everyone was expecting me to DJ, and I just got up on a stool and got out the guitar and just like sang the song about how the power went out of my house today for about 5 minutes to just this completely stunned room of ravers just looking at me with these like blank looks on their faces, just like, what the fuck are you doing, And then I finished it and they were really confused, and then I started my set and killed it. And it was just great. Or like karaoke, going out to do karaoke, open mic comedy nights, shit like that will really help you to just have that I don't give a fuck attitude that it takes to get up on stage and that it takes to be able to do something new and genuinely different in the studio. But yeah, public nonconformity, for example, lying down in a public space or facing the opposite direction in an elevator is very, very important. Wearing just like weird ass stuff for a day is really fun too, but any kind of like public nonconformity is great. Karaoke nights, open mic comedy nights, all amazing. If you've ever done any public speaking, that really helps a lot with, and I found after I started we all have this like fear of public speaking, but like once you start doing it, it's just like,
becomes a lot easier.
Get up and talk and you're fine, But yeah, those kinds of things really help to chip away at that fear and like make things a lot more easy for you. And then once you don't care and you truly don't care, there's this invincibility to that's just amazing, and you can take that with you the rest of your life. So I really recommend, public nonconformity, karaoke, open mic comedy nights, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't necessarily have to be serious, and it doesn't necessarily have to involve your computer or a MIDI controller, but it's really, it's just a great thing to free yourself from that fear forever. Your life will be way better.
Awesome. Yeah, great advice. Thank you. I want to talk about creative traps, things like procrastination, perfectionism.
Hey, everyone knows trap isn't creative. Oh. Say, no, that's perfectly good. I actually like trap music a lot. Just being a dick.
So procrastination, perfectionism, and also comparison.
Yeah. Those are all huge. And I mean, everybody procrastinates, right? Everybody procrastinates. And I mean, it could, most people think procrastinating is just totally not tackling a project and like, playing Xbox or whatever instead. But procrastination can be what we call ant fucking in the business, which is where you sit there agonizing over minute details where the overarching composition or overarching kind of gist of the piece is still undeveloped. And prioritizing things badly is definitely a form of procrastination. And one of the things that I found that just cuts through procrastination like a hot knife through butter is writing things down. And I write in my journal every morning, and whenever I have ideas, like the beginning is like I write every morning, 2 pages, longhand, just stream of consciousness, no line breaks, no anything like that. Just like fill the text, fill the pages with words, like you're like, like it's just like a texture, because you're probably never going to read it ever, and neither is anyone else. But just the fact that you've written it down and the fact that you've written it down does weird things to your brain that make it so that you can't watch yourself write down like, man, I gotta stop smoking cigarettes. Smoking cigarettes makes me feel like an idiot. You can't watch yourself write that down every morning for like a month and not do something about it. Yeah, you can't do that. You can't do that. And it's the same thing with music. Like, if you sit down and you're writing, you're like, man, if I could only finish that track, if I could only finish that track, if I could only finish that track. There eventually comes a point where you're like, man, if I'm going to like maintain any kind of self-respect, I have to do this. And then you're like, okay, whatever, I'm finishing this thing, And it helps to give yourself deadlines and stuff, writing it down on paper, but you hold yourself accountable, And there's two kind of, because people have, their will, and people think of their will like it's like one thing that's the same all the time, but there's really there's two kinds of will that are happening in a human, right? There's like your overarching will, which is where, you have your goals and your plans and whatever. And then there's your will in the moment. Like you might have like, I want to not be a fat piece of shit. But do you want to not be a fat piece of shit more than you want that candy bar? Well, I don't know, And it's like sometimes when you write things down, that overarching will, you can kind of feel the eyes of the truth on you as you're acting throughout the day. And, a lot of people feel that they need to feel like accountable to some kind of other, whether it's like, their community or, God or whatever, they feel like they're accountable to some outside source, and that's cool for various reasons, but being accountable to yourself, that's very, very important, especially if you want to do anything creative. Like there's not, you're not going to have that like, high school math teacher cracking the whip and being like, where's your homework, Vespers? Like you got to crack your own whip. And, if you want to live any kind of life that you design yourself, whether it's being an artist or being simply self-employed, you have to learn to crack your own whip, because if you don't learn to crack your own whip, someone else is going to pick that thing up and they're going to crack it for you, and they're going to have their own plans for your life, and their plans are going to be in anything but your best interests. So really, like, whether it's music or just living a life that you design, it's very, very important to learn to not procrastinate and to learn to hold yourself accountable. And really, I find like writing things down is just so crucial for that, especially like, because goals are just goals. Like, I'd like to go to France. Great. You can want to go to France your whole life. What gets you to France is a plan. And what makes goals into a plan is writing it down. So really, like, goals just in and of themselves are worthless. You need a plan, and you need a time frame, and you need all that stuff. And writing it down, there's something that I find about physically writing with a pad and a pen that's just like, typing. Yeah, it's just different than typing. So yeah, I would definitely write things down and make a habit of it. Like check in every day if you can. It's especially effective first thing in the morning, but if you can't do it first thing in the morning, the main thing is to just do it every day. And a lot of people, they have this problem when they're practicing instruments too, where they feel like, oh, well, this or that reason. Today is shot. It's a write-off. I'll practice another day. I had a rough day or whatever. And it's just like, you just got to make yourself do it to the point that it's a habit. And then once it's a habit, you have trouble not doing it. And then if you feel weird if you don't do it. But that first little bit, anytime you're making a new habit or breaking an old one, you just have to look at it from a behavioral perspective and be like, I need to do this behavior every day. It doesn't matter what I feel about it. It doesn't matter if I want to do it or what. I need to engage in this behavior every day. And then, whether that's or not engage. In a way, that's something that'll help you, quit smoking. Or I quit smoking a year ago, by the way. Very stoked.
Nice.
But yeah, I quit smoking, or or just not not be indulgent. Most people are like, because we're just not as tough as our ancestors. They had to work hard, and they had to walk around with no shoes and sleep in trees and stuff. They were just really, really tough. But our lives are just so cushy and comfortable all the time, and there's this real danger to being comfortable all the time. You could just get so comfortable and then just turn into this like indulgent blob, like in that Wall-E movie when they're all in that spaceship and everybody's fat and they're in the chairs.
Yep. Nobody talks to each other. They're just texting all the time.
Yeah, I know. We're going there.
Wait a second. Aren't we already there?
Yeah. Did you see that guy?
Minus the floating chairs.
Yeah, minus the floating chairs. I love that guy who like, this is just totally unrelated, but that guy who is he was afraid of the Y2K bug and he hid for 14 years and he just came out this week, right? He just came out after like he was convinced that the world had ended. So for 14 years, he was like hiding in his house or in his bunker or whatever, eating his like canned foods. And he was like, okay, it's been 14 years. I think it's finally time to go check on the outside world. And he comes out and he's like, oh, the world didn't end. And they interviewed him. And they're like, what's different between 14 years ago and now? And he's like, nobody hangs out with each other anymore. They're all just on their fucking smartphones all day. It's
yeah.
funny.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's a big difference. But yeah.
What you were referring to with the writing in the morning, is that something called the morning pages from the Artist Way?
Yes. But I mean, you can call it keeping a journal too. She by no means invented that, But anyone who keeps a journal, like any like huge name artist or whatever has a journal, and it's like, I mean, that's how we learn a lot about these people from the past. As we'll take apart their notebooks and stuff. Not that you should worry about that. Well, maybe make us another set of fake notebooks for your legacy or whatever if you want to. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's like famous artists and people of consequence typically keep journals. But doing it in the morning and just making a habit of it is definitely, and that's something I totally agree with Julia Cameron about. Is that? But yeah, you should check out her book. It's called The Artist's Way, and it's got all these different exercises and stuff that you can do to help chisel away the fear, like so much plaque from your teeth. And then,
fantastic.
You're
no
off
one
to the
likes
races.
plaque.
No one likes plaque. Fuck that.
Yeah. Be a creativity dentist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Creativity dentist.
So coming back to creativity, we wanted to talk about some of the myths about creativity. In particular, are some people just born creative types and other people just not creative? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that creativity, like anything else, is something that you can develop, right? And something that you can put intention into developing or not. And, granted, a good part of being creative comes back to that ability to not be afraid of what people think and to be like, hey, wait a second, maybe the world isn't flat, and yeah, that's important. But a lot of people, they have this idea that, like, you can't learn imagination, and like you're either born with a talent that it's your duty to share, or you're not, and you should go, alphabetize insurance forms all day, right? But that's not true at all. Everybody is creative. All kids are creative. I mean, I don't think you can find anybody who's like didn't imagine their living room floor was lava like one time when they were a kid. Like lava plays such a part in your life when you're a kid too. Lava is not nearly as much of a part of my adult life. I wish it was more of a part. But anyway, you can't find somebody who didn't like think that their living room floor was lava at some point. Like we're all creative, and it's just like being able to stay creative as you age. That's really important, especially like when there's all these people telling you to be realistic and like go do what everybody else does so you can be miserable like them. So it's really a lot of it comes down to that. But being creative is something that you can develop, and like once you give yourself permission to use those muscles, if you use them regularly, they will get stronger, and it's just like anything else, and I mean, for example, this year, like my New Year's resolution last year, I was like, man, I am a musician, a professional musician. I've been a professional musician for years, and I'm not really good enough at any instruments to actually play them on stage, or to have like like it would take me like 50 takes to get like a simple kick snare pattern in that I could leave unquantized, So I was like, I'm I'm just going to do this. And my whole life I've been like, oh, I'm just not an instrumentalist. My hands are just not that dexterous. Like, I make music with my mind. I'm not like a hands-on musician. And I just had not given myself permission to be like, hey, maybe I could play an instrument. Maybe I should put in the time to develop it. Because I tried playing guitar when I was like 13, and because I wasn't a rock star in like a year, I kind of lost interest, and it's like ever since then I just hadn't given myself permission to be like, I don't care. Maybe I'll do some performance. Maybe I'll be, bad at finger drumming for a bit. But, once I was like, I don't care. I'm just gonna try, and then practiced for like hours every day, and now I can finger drum, and it's a part of my live set every time I play out, and it's like completely revolutionized the way I make music. And I look back at the music that I made before I started finger drumming last year, and I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, I was totally doing things in this really convoluted, long, stupid way that could have just been solved by my hands that were there the whole time, and I just hadn't given myself permission to be like, hey, maybe I could be a finger drummer.
You didn't think you were creative or musical in that way.
No, I didn't.
You weren't.
Therefore, I wasn't.
You
because,
were your own obstacle.
Yeah, because I was my own obstacle. And it's the same thing too. Like, when I was starting out, like, it took me a good 10 years before I was making a living as a musician, because I looked around me at all the musicians that I'd known that were professional musicians, and most of them had been part of some genre at some point, and then that genre fell out of fashion and they didn't change with the times, and then they were like grumpy and like teaching music at some high school and complaining about all the crap that the kids listen to these days, and just they were just like over it, and they'd have like a gig at some local bar somewhere, but like that was it, and then I was like, wait a second, that's because I don't live in a city where professional musicians gravitate to. And I was basing, because if you base, because the future is limitless, it's infinite, it's limitless, it could be anything. And if you take that undefined, limitless anything, and you use the past, which is defined, there's no more possibility there, that happened, and you use something that's defined as a map of something that's not defined, you're going to force this beautiful infinity into this little box, and then that's all it can be, And I wasn't really willing to say, hey, maybe I could rock like 5,000 person crowds on a regular basis. Maybe I could be a finger drummer. Maybe I could do my own vocals. I'd never given myself permission to do that. So those things were never real. And it was like a game of inches where basically, the world was like, hey, you're not bad at music. You should take another few steps down that path. Hey, take another few steps down that path. Hey, and I just kind of, over time, just from the sheer fact that I did it that much, a job materialized, But I hadn't really given myself permission to be like, okay, that's like, I was like, okay, I'm going to be poor my whole life. Nobody's going to listen to my music. And that's okay. I'm just going to keep it real, and I'm just going to do it because that's what I love. And I don't care if I'm poor, but that it was important to let go of the fear of, being poor or, living a life that some people did not think much of. Yes, it was important to let go of that fear, but it was also important to let go of the idea, like, I'd given myself permission to basically fail in a lot of people's eyes, which was very, very important to me becoming a musician. But I'd also set myself up for failure by assuming that that's what being a musician meant. Because I hadn't given myself, because everybody, we all have that in the back of our minds. Like, who am I to be a fucking rock star? Like, who am I to do that? And until you can say, you know what, fuck it, who is anybody? Who is anybody to do that? And really, what separates people who are professional musicians from people who are talented, hobbyists, is just the balls to really say, hey, this is a real possibility. Like, I'm going to dream this, and then I'm going to become it, And, when you look at people like, Waddy from The Antwoord is, amazing. Like his very person is like an extension of his intentional creativity, and he's like completely reinvented who he is as a human being. Like not just what his music like he's not like Waddy in this project. Like he is Ninja now, you know, and like Max Normal is R.I.P. You know, and he will whenever he goes through these evolutions, like they're complete, and like his actual personality changes, you know, and it's just like it's crazy to think that you know your thinking can transform not just what you do but who you are, you know, and people don't realize that. Like there's this kind of fatalistic attitude that a lot of people have to who they are and who they become that is very like it's very poisonous, and it's so easy to let it go. Like this prison that you find yourself in, it's entirely fictional, you know. And if you just say, hey, you know, I don't have to alphabetize insurance forms all day. Like I can just leave, you know, and I can, you know, and I mean, yes, it might be a little bit difficult to do that if you're born in like India or something, but those of us who have an internet connection and a computer to watch this video on are among a very privileged subsection of the population that have the ability to imagine something different and simply do it at any point. You know, no one is going to stop you. The only person who's going to stop you from becoming your dream is you. Everyone else wants you to succeed. Everyone else thinks it would be fantastic if you made amazing, crazy, out-of-the-box music that blew their minds. Everyone else is waiting for that. Everyone else wants that to happen. The only person who doesn't want that to happen is that little demon in the back of your head who's like, ooh, but can my ego handle failure? You know,
even the possibility
of failure, you know, like people want to feel like they're just good at everything they do, you know, and they're just like awesome. And you know what? You're not, but you can be good at everything you do if you give yourself permission to fail, because mistakes are what learning looks like. That's when you know you're learning. Like if you're looking at a mistake, you're like, great, that's knowledge now. That's no longer just an abstract possibility. That's knowledge. That mistake is something that I can take that will make me stronger, make me smarter, and make me a better artist. You know, and most people they look at a mistake and they're like, oh God, what will people think of me? How will I hold my head high? You know, how will I be able to be like, you know, I'm a flawless, consummate musician if I've made an error. You know, I should just hide in my house and make all my errors in my house while biting my hands off. And, you know, that's just not the way to do it. Like, go out, make mistakes, make them publicly, you know, wear them on your sleeve, because that's what makes you better. You know, that's what makes you better. That's what makes you learn. That's what makes you grow, is to make these mistakes, you know? So
yeah, that willingness to make mistakes, the willingness to embrace failure as a possibility, as a likelihood.
Yeah.
Is really important. Like my background in jazz, I do a lot of improvisation. And in improvisation, invariably you hit notes that sound funky. But you can see
not James Brown funky. We're talking about like after gym ass sweat funky. Like yes. not James Brown funky.
Yeah. And you can take two different musicians, and one person will pull it off with confidence, and the other person will react as if it was a bad note. And in one case, it's a wrong note, and in the other case, it's a right note. It's totally crazy the way that works, and that person's intention and confidence in doing that. One person embraces it, the other person fears it, even in that moment. And I heard a great quote about improvisation, and they said that improvisation is the courage to move from one note to the next.
That is great.
Yeah. So something I always try to remind myself of, and I relate that back to when I'm writing electronic music in the studio. It's that courage to be able to take the step.
Cool.
Yeah. And
that's a great quote.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, hey, on that note, another like really common misconception that people have is that there is like a correct way to do fucking anything creative. That there's like a correct way and other ways are incorrect, and that there's some sort of an absolute valuation system upon which music can be created. And there was this amazing study done that I read about this year that I was like, wow, this is just awesome that they did this. Where they had two groups of people, right? They had a group of professional, adjudicators for, the Royal Conservatory of Music, who judge, music recitals and contests and stuff professionally. And then they had a group of lay people, all right, who, were just not necessarily musically educated at all. Were just people with a pair of ears.
Okay.
All right. And they first played the performances audio only of the entrants for this music contest. And they found that when listening to audio only, that the professional adjudicators were no better than the average person at picking who won the contest. All right? They were no better. Then they found out that when they showed these people the visuals of the contest and what the performer looked like, the way they carried themselves, their attitude towards the performance, that both the adjudicators and the lay people were easily able to find the winner, easily able to identify the winner. And then, when they found that, they made another study where they got a bunch of deaf people to watch the musical performances, and they were just as good as picking the winners as the people who trained themselves and were these like professional adjudicators.
So were they looking at
They were looking at video.
confidence?
They were looking at video of these performers, and they asked these deaf people to just take a guess who won the contest, and they guessed deaf people were just as good as the professionals.
Based on the body language and the appearance
body
of
language,
physical
appearance,
confidence when they're
entirely
doing this.
entirely visual.
Wow.
And they were just as good as at picking the winner. And that just really goes, to underscore how important it is to have that strength of character and to have that courage to move from one note to the next as a performer. And, what you said about those two, like, I think that study just completely underscores that point that you just made.
Absolutely.
And really, like, whatever you got to do to slay those demons in your mind, I mean, that's as important as, knowing the difference between a C sharp and a B flat and what key they go into, like it's so important, man. It really is.
Cool. There was something you were mentioning earlier, which is kind of a strategy to help spur creativity or get yourself a little bit unstuck, or at least get yourself going, and that's thinking inside the box.
Yes. Very, very important. A lot of people, they get all excited about thinking outside the box and wanting every possible option ever, right? And, it is nice to have lots of options. I openly admit to checking out online forums, checking out new software all the time, nerding out on weird new MIDI controllers all the time, and just being all over all these possibilities. But the thing is, if you're going to be creative, right, there needs to be some kind of a box to think outside of and inside of, right? And if you just have an idea without any structure, yeah, that idea can be great, but it's not really that useful, and it's not really like to create a framework and use your creativity and say, okay, I'm going to make a song that is going to be based entirely on the movements of my pet ferret, for example. And I'm going to try it. No, I don't have a pet ferret, but I don't know. It could have been anything. I
wouldn't put it past you.
No, I'm not home enough to have pets, man. I'm on the road all the time. It would be, but anyway, let's say you see your pet ferret and you're like, I'm totally inspired by this pet ferret. I'm going to make this whole song that's about this pet ferret, and I have to figure out ways that I can make these melodies capture the essence of that pet ferret, right? Now you have a box that you can be creative inside of. And now there is some kind of a system of evaluation where a solution can be more or less effective, right? But without a framework, all solutions are equally effective, right? So it's tough to really gauge, what was right or wrong, or what was creative or not, without creating first a framework. And if you create the framework and solve all the problems inside the box, and then start thinking outside the box, then you're going to end up with a much more robust and timeless piece of art than if you were to just say, hey, here's some ideas I had. You know, it's not really that useful. One thing, and I mean, this goes again back to finger drumming, because I just spent all year like finger drumming like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But
you got some good videos on your channel, though.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you can check out some videos on my YouTube channel /ill.Gates music, or just go to ill.Gates.com. It's pretty easy to find everything you need from there. But I found like forcing myself to be like, okay, I'm gonna make a whole track with 16 single MIDI note triggers. How can I make a whole track just with these 16 MIDI note triggers that I can actually physically play with my hands on a stage? And what that did for my workflow and for my live performance and for everything, like I wish I had started doing it ages ago. You know, like it's just like a complete game changer for me. And now I'm going back to my old tracks and I'm taking them and I'm saying like, okay, so how can I take this track that I wrote with all the options in the world, and there's tons of notes and all these melodies and all this stuff. I'm like, how can I make a version of this that I can actually physically play? You know, like, what am I going to loop? What am I going to play? What am I going to do? Etc. And forcing myself into that very, very limited 16 MIDI note grid has been one of the best things that ever happened to me creatively. Mm-hmm. You know, so I really like, you know, and it could be an abstract box like a ferret being interpreted into, you know, minimal techno or whatever, or it could be, you know, a very real box like a piece of gear, you know, and you can be like, okay, I'm going to write this song for this piece of gear. This song is about this piece of gear. It's informed by this piece of gear. So, I mean, it could be an exercise in getting to know all the ins and outs of piece of gear. It could be, I mean, I learned a lot about the sampler. I thought I knew everything about the sampler until I started doing this, you know, and then I was like, man, you know, there are things that I'm going to need this sampler to do that I don't, you know, that I had to figure out. There are new things that I was forced to figure out because of that format. But yeah, there really is a lot to be said for creating a box, and even just stylistically, you know, it's very hard for people to understand a musician where all of their songs are different. And I have that problem because that's my MO. It's like I try to do something new every time. I'm like, okay, well, you know, like if I really nail a track and it's a hit and people like it, I'm not like, great, how can I make that track again and again and again like most people. And it's just like a natural aversion that I have to repeating myself. But it really makes you a lot easier to understand as a sonic brand and as like a creative brand for people if there's like a thing and they can say, oh, well, what does Vespers music sound like? Well, it sounds like insert interesting sentence X, you know, and then like people have a kind of framework in which they can understand you. That's a box too, you know, and it's important to make yourself a style box, and it's important to make yourself, you know, a box for each track, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that just really helps you not get bogged down with this limitless sea of options we have. I mean, talk about first world problems, you know, like it's a long way from editing samples on the jog wheel on my MPC, man. It's a long, long way. But yeah, definitely make a box. Think inside of it. Think outside of it. Creation of a box itself is a creative act. So really, there's just, you know, I mean, and it's not a game until there's a game board and there's rules, you know. Then it's just some stuff that's happening, you know. If you make a game of it, and, you know, then it becomes something that you can get better at because you've made a game of it, you know. And it's not just like random things, you know. So really, yeah, make a box, think inside of it, throw yourself some curveballs, challenge yourself. But yeah, it's a very good way to unlock deeper levels of your creativity, to make a box. And
nice.
Think inside the box.
I like that a lot, especially in the realm of now that we're producing music digitally, and we have things like unlimited numbers of plugins, unlimited numbers of samples, and computers that are so powerful you can have almost unlimited numbers of tracks.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, when there's that much choice, it means you can easily get overwhelmed with just all the different directions that you can go.
Totally.
So I think that's a really good technique.
Yeah, very, very important to think inside the box as well as outside the box.
Cool. So when we were connecting earlier as well, you talked a bit about the importance of learning how to trust your own opinion. versus the opinions of your friends. We touched on that a little bit
Yeah.
earlier in the interview, but I think there's something there we can go deeper into.
Yeah, I think we should definitely learn who not to ask for their opinions. And one thing that I found that was a real problem for me is I would have friends who I was like, this person is like, they know music, man. Like, this person's got a crazy record collection. They're hunting, they're beat digging all the time. Like, this person is some kind of a musical authority in my mind, you know? And then I would show them my tracks, and they would say these little things that I would be like, man, that is so true. And it would just like stick in the back of my head and just fuck me up when I was trying to write. And I would be like trying to write music that would impress them, and not music that was like for me, and not music that was, you know, that was going to be my music anymore. And it becomes really paralyzing when you've internalized all these voices. And it's not just the people telling you can't be an artist and stuff, but it's also the people telling you how to be an artist. You know, those are also
How they think you should
how
be
they
an
think you
artist.
should be an artist.
Yeah.
And some musicians are just grumpy cunts who fucking hate 99% of things. You know, that's just how I mean, I'm a grumpy cunt who hates 99% of music that I come across. That's just who I am. And, you know, I wouldn't ask me for track feedback, because my track feedback would probably be like, your track's fucking boring. go do something interesting. You know, I wouldn't ask me for track feedback. I'd go home and cry and like not produce anymore if I asked me for feedback. So it's very important to like, you know, to know who not to ask for people. And I mean, you know, opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one, right? And you know, just because some people like flexing their opinion more and they think it has more value doesn't necessarily mean it does. And I mean, for me, like, I mean, my wife, for example, is the best taste in music of any of my friends. And I never ask her what she thinks about my music, because it's never anything good. It's never anything good. And like, you know, there'll be the odd track that she'll like, you know, put in one of her sets and stuff. But she thinks like 80% of my music is lame, and she just doesn't tell me about it, because it'll fuck me up, and then I won't be able to support her, or we won't eat. So you know,
Wow.
It's like, yeah, I don't even ask my wife for feedback, you know. So it's like it is important to you know, to know who not to ask for feedback. And you know, I mean, do you really need other people's feedback? I mean, maybe sometimes, you know, when you're talking about like engineering, it's good to ask for people's feedback. Like I have a few people I know who are amazing mix engineers that I'll ask them, be like, hey, you know, what could I do? And a lot of the time they'll be like, oh yeah, you know, it's great, but like, where's the stereo spread in this frequency range? And I'll be like, whoa, you're right, it's all mono in there. Oh man, I could totally make that better. And
So getting objective feedback
yeah,
from people that
objective
have
technical
qualified skill sets versus opinion from people that are commenting on whether they like it or not versus whether it's well
Exactly.
produced or not.
Exactly. Well, production feedback is very important, right? Asking people who are like hard-nosed mix engineers about your mix downs and stuff, very important. You know, that's going to help you get
Yeah.
better. But asking people who you think have good taste what they think of your music, you're just going to set yourself up to get bummed out, you know? And frankly, most people have terrible fucking taste. And if you were to write actually tasteful music all the time, most people are not going to like it. You know, people like horrible tacky crap like fucking Katy Perry and shit, you know? And like her songs are awful. It's like seeing some like really ignorant bumper sticker that you just can't unsee once you see it, and that stupid fucking slogan will be in your head forever. You know, you'll be like washing the dishes like, hey kids, and you'll be like, fuck you, Katy Perry, fuck you, you know? And it's like most people like that crap. Most people have terrible taste in everything. Clothes, music, cars, architecture, everything. Most people have terrible taste. And, you know, you just have to just recognize that, like, if you make music for people with a good taste, it's going to be hard to make a living and to get anywhere with your music. And really, you know, you need to recognize that, like, a lot of people that like your music are going to like Katy Perry. They're going to like Justin Bieber. They're going to like horrible fucking crap. And they're also going to like your music. And you know what? That's just life. That's just how it is. So, you know, don't try and impress a bunch of people with good taste. And don't ask people with good taste for their opinions. Because they're just going to bum you out. And frankly, your taste is what's important. You know, you're the musician that is making your music, not them.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people get stuck between they want to become successful as a musician. So they do care about other people's opinions because they think that other people's opinions are the ticket because they need to fill up their shows, they need to buy their music and things like that. But to the extent that that can compromise their enjoyment and their sense of fulfillment coming from inside, being internally generated. And that comes back to our previous conversation of you can have two musicians playing the same thing, and one person is developing their confidence internally and they do so with authority, and the other person does so as an apology, and the way the crowd reacts to it is completely different.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what it is to be an authority on music.
Sure.
Right? Okay, so to be an authority on music, you have to have a strong opinion. That's it. If you have a strong opinion, you are now a music authority. You don't need to go to school for it. You don't need to like study with your pinky up in the air and like, you know, just like be all pretentious about it. No one really has any more authority than anyone else to say what's good music or not. They don't, you know, and you know, that authority that you're talking about, that inner authority that people have when they can just get up on stage and be like, you know what, this is good. I'm confidently going to just deliver this performance. That's good music. You know, a music that is performed with authority. That's good music. You know, that's a good performance. You know, in the closest thing to objective terms that you're going to get, right? And you know, learning to just like let go of like, hey, well, you know, this DJ is famous, so they must know what they're talking about, or like, you know, this person studied at such and such a music school that costs more than I could ever afford, so they must know what they're talking about. None of them know what they're talking about. Everybody's just bullshitting their way along. Like we all are. I'm bullshitting my way along. He's bullshitting his way along. We're all just making shit up. And, you know, people like it. That's the closest thing to an authority that there is. Like if you can make someone feel something, congratulations. You win at music. That's it. Make some people feel some shit with sound. Then if you can do that, you're an authority on music. If you can't make people feel anything, then you're not. That's it. That's musical authority. So really just take that out of your head. Okay, you're the authority on your music, no one else.
Cool. All right. Another thing you'd mentioned earlier was about expressing your goals to people and not telling people about your goals until you've achieved them.
Yeah, that's very important. They've done a bunch of studies where they found, you know, we're social animals, you know, because if you can't get along with the other people in the cave, you're going to freeze to death or starve or get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or whatever. So, you know, we have a very strong social component to everything that we do. And when you have a goal, right, it's easy to get excited about it. Or if you're working on something, it's easy to get excited about it and to want to share it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you share goals with people that you care about impressing them, and they say, hey man, that's really cool. I think you're really cool for having that goal and for doing that. That's the payoff that you were waiting to get at the end. It's like eating your dessert in the middle of your dinner. Are you going to finish your dinner if you just ate a bunch of ice cream? No, you're not. You're not. So, you know, it's important to, and, you know, people will then fail at their goal, but people are amazing at doing these mental gymnastics around things that you would think are objectively true. And we all have that one friend where, you know, you'll have something happen to you guys as a group, and then you'll be hanging out, and they'll be like, hey, you remember that one time when I did this and that and this, and then, you know, you said that, and then this happened, and you're like, holy shit, that's totally not what happened at all. This deluded motherfucker thinks it was their idea to do this, that, and the other thing, when actually it was Steve's idea all along, and Steve was the one who ordered the tickets online and everything, and they remember doing it? Like, are you crazy? And most people are that crazy. Most people can totally, like, memory is a completely malleable thing. At experiments, they were able to convince people that they hung out with, like, Bugs Bunny at Disneyland and shit, which would never happen. Bugs Bunny's a Warner Brothers character. But if you show people a bunch of Photoshop photos of them at Disneyland, and their parents are there with them, and they're going through old family photos of them at Disneyland, and there's a fake one where they're hanging out with Bugs Bunny, they'll remember that happening, right? And people like to think that there's this like perfect black box recorder in the back of your head remembering everything. No, not at all. You know, and let's say, you know, you tell everybody about some cool idea you had and then you totally fail at it. You're going to figure out some way to make that totally okay in your head. You're going to be like, oh, well, you know, I mean, the finale of Breaking Bad was on and I had to watch it. And then, you know, like, you know, and then my mom was just going on about the fucking driveway. And like, okay, so I did it. And then, you know, whatever, that goal that I had didn't happen. But, you know, life happens, whatever.
So justifying failure is something that most of us have become
we're all
good at.
Totally. We're all great at that. We're great at that. I justify my failures to myself all the time. In my mind, everything I've done is fucking perfect most of the time, you know? And it's like, I have to actually sit down and go, wait a second, dude, you totally fucked up lots of times. Like, come on, you know? And then I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. But we all have these, like, they're just like defense mechanisms for your ego so that you can have confidence, you know? And you know, and it's really like, you know, we all have these defense mechanisms against failure and against things that will erode our confidence. So we can tell people about, you know, some cool thing that we want to do. And if they say that you're cool, that's good enough for you, for most people. And if that's statistically that if you share your goals with people, it's like, you know, you don't have to do them in your mind anymore because you've already got that emotional payoff. And you're like, oh, great. Okay. Mission accomplished, time to move on. And I mean, yeah, it's in your subconscious mind, but it's still very real and it'll still definitely stop you from doing your goals. So, you know, and that's very true with half-finished tracks. You know, very true. If you show, you know, your friend who's like a total yes man, your half-finished track, and they're like, oh my God, dude, you're amazing. You know, if you ever finish this track and you put it out, it would be like a #1 hit. And you would be totally famous overnight and be a rock star. And we'd all be like eating caviar off of strippers at your house like all day, man. This track is amazing. And you're going to be like, sick, dude. Awesome. High fives. But then if you finish that track and it doesn't become a hit and maybe other people don't like it and then you're not eating caviar off of strippers in your mansion, well, then you failed. And you can't fail until you try. So if you just kind of half try and get people to give you props for it.
Or you never say the track's done.
Yeah, or never actually say the track's done, then it can't suck because it's not done. You know, you can't be like, oh, your halfway done track is rubbish because it's not done as a perfectly good defense, right? So, you know, we protect ourselves in these little games that we play. And it's really important, like, especially if you're doing something big that you know is, like, legit. Like, when you get that groove that you're like, okay, this one could really go somewhere. Don't show it to people. Don't make MP3s. Don't tell anybody. Don't do anything except for finish it and finish it to the best of your abilities and as quickly as possible, right? Because if you tell people and you show people, statistically, the odds of you finishing it, doing it as well, go way down. They go way down. So I never print MP3s of things until it's like mix down time. You know, and then I'll get the track so it's like, you know, it's written, but, you know, maybe the subs aren't quite perfect or whatever. And then I'll play it out a few times, gauge people's reaction, tinker with the mix down, maybe make it shorter. I make my tracks shorter a lot by the time they're done. But that's it. And you don't be like, hey, everybody, this is my half-finished track. You just kind of slip it in there and see how people react, you know. And one of the best ways to get feedback of your music is to not tell your friends that it's yours, right? And then to just have it in the playlist. And if they go, hey, what's that? Well, then you know that they're not just being yes men. Or if they're like, this is fucking crap, you know, then you're gonna be like, okay, well, next MP3, break. But you know, it's better to show people your. If you must show people your tracks, don't let them know they're yours. Don't tell them it's yours until they're genuinely done.
One of the things you mentioned as well is that listening to your own track over and over again can be like the death of it.
Yeah.
And so
definitely.
like when you're
especially
producing,
if you make an MP3. Oof.
And that actually brings us to our next point, which is drastic changes and not being afraid of making drastic changes.
Totally. Okay. All right, so let's talk about this a bit. So this is one of my favorite techniques for getting out of a stagnant period when I'm working on a project, right? And basically what happens is in the beginning of the project, anything is possible, right? So you get really excited and you're hearing what's possible. So you might have a synth patch that like, reminds you of like, some like beautiful summer day, and you're like, oh man, this is just like great, and I'm hearing this piece of music that's just like, it could be in the background of that like, idyllic scene where like, the protagonist in their movie is having like some recollection of the past, and it's just like this warm, fuzzy, amazing place, and you hear that possibility just from you play that one note, and you're like, oh, and you can hear that whole track even though it's not made, and you get excited because you want to make that track, right? Or whatever emotion it is, right? And then you go in and you get there, and that possibility starts becoming more and more real, but reality is always more disappointing than the imagination, inevitably, right? And then as it becomes more real, it becomes more disappointing, and it maybe doesn't quite measure up to that beautiful, nostalgic, perfect day that your character is remembering or whatever. And you start to get bummed out about it, and you start amp fucking a little bit and being like, you know what? I think maybe, the attack transient on that snare drum need a bit of work. I'm gonna like sit down and compress the snare drum for like 4 hours, And you do that, maybe it's a couple days, maybe it's a week or whatever. And you get to the point where you have like kind of like half of this emotion there, and you're like, oh, it's just the mix. I know it. It's just the mix. Like if I could just get the mix nice, then, and then you fuck some more, and then you end up with this like really well mixed, halfway finished song, that is just still sounds halfway finished, and then you're like, okay, well, what do I add, right? And because you've heard it the same way so much, and because you've mixed it, well, it's there. There's not really that much room to add stuff anymore because it's been mixed without those parts. And then when you're trying to shoehorn these parts in, and it's just not working, all right? And also, by the time you've added all these mixing plugins and stuff, your processor is going to be pretty close to the limit, right? And then you can't be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to load up the whole Vienna orchestral collection and like do this crazy string part. You're not going to do that because you don't have the processor headroom for it. And you've kind of like the track has become set in its half finished way. Okay. So that's a very common problem. How do you get around that problem? Well, what I like to do is to try to go back to that state where anything is possible at the beginning. And one of the best ways to do that is to just make these huge, sweeping, drastic changes. So what I'll often do is I'll make a new save, and I'll stop numbering them. This will be like some totally new title for a save. And I'll make that save, and then anything that's taking a lot of processor, I would just render it down to audio, so that I have tons of processor headroom. And then, I'll change the BPM, I'll make it a different genre, I'll start like just totally like mulching my sounds through granular synthesis or weird stuff and like just getting chaotic things that are based on my sounds. And just jam, I'll make it into a sound pack so that it's like just the whole track is now 16 sounds so they can play. And then I'll be like, whoa, that's totally different. And then that world of possibility opens up again. And you start, oh, I hear this. Boom, I hear that. Boom, I hear that. Boom. And then in come all those new parts. And how I used to think this process was going to work before it became a part of my workflow was I thought I would go down this rabbit hole, maybe get a remix of the song or generate a few parts and then bring them back into the original project. And 90% of the time, what happens is I end up liking this like totally drastic audio sample based remix where I've like bounced everything down to audio and just like destroyed it. I end up liking that way better than the original track, and I'll bring maybe like 3 or 4 channels from the original track into the new project, but I very, very rarely end up going back to the old project. And giving yourself permission to be destructive is so important, because if you don't have permission to be destructive, you get this like idea in your head like, hey, I put in like so much effort to get the track to this like kind of half finished point that, I don't want to waste all the effort that I put into that mix down. I don't want to waste all the effort that I put into like making that idea. So I'm going to sit there and like just stare at it and think about it. And like, is the most surefire way to waste all of the energy that you've put into a track is to not finish it and to not keep it moving. And it's definitely 100% of your energy is wasted if you don't finish that thing. And a lot of the time, you got to render things down to audio to free up your processor headroom, and then you can flip shit backwards and pitch it around and do sampley things with it, which just sounds great and it's a lot of fun. But you have to give yourself permission to destroy, to be able to kind of get out of that creative slump. Because if you just sit there trying to add stuff to what essentially is an incomplete sounding but complete mix, you're not going to fit them in there. And I mean, one of the best quotes I've ever heard is, "Perfection is not when there's nothing left to add; it's when there's nothing left to take away."
Mm-hmm.
And that is really important when you're writing music, because a lot of the time, you'll end up with these totally unnecessary parts that are in there just because you've spent time on them.
Yeah,
and
you're invested into them, therefore you don't want to take them out.
Yeah, and that's again why it's so important to make your parts quickly, so that you don't have these like unhealthy emotional attachments to parts that should maybe be deleted or flip backwards and sampled or whatever. So yeah, I try to make as drastic just completely drastic changes at all points during the process except for mixdown. But it's a great way to give yourself permission to do that, is to just make a new save with a new title. Hell, maybe it's even a new project folder, if that's what it takes to get yourself out of that zone, and then just get your hands dirty and break stuff, and then in the process of destroying that, you're going to have these crazy ideas that are going to be way more relevant than you just feeling shitty about this thing and looking at it.
Yeah. So I think there's huge merit into that moving quickly, because if you maintain momentum, you've got like artistic inertia and it's harder to stop you.
Yeah.
As soon as you start slowing down, you lose that inertia and it's easier to get like stuck in the mud. Kind of like you're running on mud if you're running on quicksand or something. And I think that's something that's been huge in what you've taught that myself and a lot of other people have gotten a lot of value out of. I did want to ask you though, yourself being a bass music producer, the amount of engineering that goes into sounds now is just unbelievable compared to music even 4 or 5 years ago. Like what goes into bass sounds and percussion specifically in the newer genres of bass music is just incredible. So given that you want really engineered nice sounds, how do you balance that and navigate that with respect to not getting stuck and continuing to move quickly? How do you do that?
Okay, well, this is something that I cover quite extensively in my workshop series, the ill.Methodology. But I find it very, very effective to break your time up into different kinds of sessions, right? Because if you sit down in the studio and you're just like, here I am in the studio, okay, I'm going to start this track from scratch. I'm going to design every single sound from scratch. I'm going to play every single melody from scratch. I'm going to, do this, that, and the other thing. You're setting yourself up for months of work that you're never going to reach the end of, frankly, and it's a really good idea to basically think like, okay, if I'm going to write, I need to keep the momentum going while I'm writing so that I don't get stuck and so that I actually finish this thing. So then if you sit down and analyze, what musical things are necessary to the writing process and what musical things are other than the writing process, you'll find that much of the time things like, super intricate synth programming or practicing an instrument or, doing like, really like engineered like drum bus racks or whatever, they're not really writing. They can be part of the writing process, but it's not necessary that they're part of the writing process. So if you separate your time into sessions where you're exploring or preparing, and then sessions when you're writing, I often call them daytime and nighttime sessions because that's typically when they occur. I don't like starting a track after dinner because usually it doesn't get finished that day. I like to finish my tracks like in at least the writing part. I like to finish it in one usually quite long session. But anyway, so I nighttime, I'll finger drum, or I'll play the piano for a bit, or I'll, like just make like the sickest bass patch that I can make and save it to the library or whatever. But you want to prepare all these tools, whether they're like, physically knowing how to play an instrument or having sound design or what, having patterns, making beats. Like I'll make like a whole beat and then set it aside. Because if you take a clip in Ableton and you drag it into like a MIDI clip and you drag it into the browser, it will call up all the devices that MIDI clip played. So you can make like a whole beat and then just save that as a clip pack and drag it back in, and there you go, there's a beat. And and that goes back to what I was saying about being able to drastically change things. Like a lot of the time when I'm making these drastic changes for a track, I'll do things like delete 100% of the drums and just like bring in other drums and be like, what all those melodies sound like with a completely different genre of drum beat. And then I'll be like, wow, that sounds way better as dance hall than it did as like drum and bass or whatever, But having these tools at your fingertips and having these really well processed sounds like ready to go is super, super important. And it's also like, it's also important not to start too many things that you're not going to finish at one time. Because any unfinished track, like unless you're a real master of just non-attachment and letting go, any unfinished track is going to kind of like sit there in the back of your mind, and it's going to eat at you,
Eats at you.
You feel like a negligent parent or something,
Yeah.
I mean, not that I know anything about parenting, but, but it makes me feel like a bad parent, and it hurts my heart, so I don't like having things unfinished. So, I'll have things that I'll, folders where I'll, there'll be a project folder in there, but it was an exploratory project folder, I was just fucking around. I wasn't necessarily like writing, but separating it into like, when you're writing and when you're prepping is really, really huge. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. Don't smoke weed when you're starting a song because you're not going to finish it that day. It's great to smoke weed when you're practicing or doing sound design or going through millions of folders of sample CDs and finding the good ones and putting them in your library. Great. That shit gets boring. It's repetitive. Sometimes it's good to smoke weed. And, when you're actually physically playing an instrument, weed will definitely help you log the like 5 hours a day of practice that you need to get good at an instrument. But if you are smoking weed when you're writing, the tendency is to create this big jumbled mess of way too many plugins and tons of automation and all kinds of like half-finished ideas that you might maybe use some point. And then you have no processor and it's hard to cut and copy and paste and move things around. And you just burned out, and then you smoke another joint, and then it just becomes silliness. So I would really like, smoke weed in your prep sessions if you must, but don't smoke weed when you're writing because it doesn't help. Like maybe, at the end of the process, if you need like a fresh pair of ears, and you're like, wow, I've been listening to the same thing for like 20 hours. What does it really sound like? Go to the other room, listen to some other people's music, hang out with your girlfriend or whatever for a bit, smoke a joint, then come back in and be like, okay, what did I do? And then you'll hear it as like an audience member. It is sometimes good for that, but really it's not good for writing. It's really not. It's good for jamming and it's good for exploring, not good for writing.
Cool. Thanks, brother.
Drugs are bad, okay?
Yeah. Well, we've talked about that a lot in this specific program, as things that challenge the creative process and things that enhance the creative process.
Yeah.
And in general, just being healthy and keeping your body and channel clear is one of those things. And that's
totally
why, just hearing about your process of quitting smoking, and you've been 2 months now without drinking as well, and things like that.
I do start every day with a line of cocaine, though. Big fat one every morning. That's really just helps me get up on that horse and get my confidence together. And no, I'm totally fucking kidding. I'm not, that would be terrible.
Cut. Sweet, brother. Well, I think we're probably about ready to wrap up. Is there any final words of wisdom, little golden nuggets you'd like to leave with people?
Yeah, just don't take this shit so seriously, man. Don't. Like, it's important to approach it with an earnestness and to seriously dedicate your time to it. But if you stop having fun, why would you do it? Like, it's really important that it's fun. Even if you're a professional musician, on a deadline, have fun. Really, that's what's going to keep you coming back, and that's what's going to make it into an obsession and not just like a thing that you think you should do, right? What's going to make it into a real like obsession, and it's going to get you to put the time in to actually become the musician you want to become, is for it to be fun, and like really don't, like, if you're sitting there in the studio and you're like pulling your hair out and stressing out and afraid of what people think and thinking about all these different pieces of advice you've gotten and blah 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 blah, you're not gonna have fun. So really, all of this that we've told you, it's all, yeah, it's all useful advice and everything, but what you should be thinking about when you're in the studio is, this rocks. How can I do more of this? That's what you should be feeling. That's what you should be feeling in the studio, is like, man, this is great. Like, I love doing this. This is how I want to spend my time. That's what you should be feeling. And you should pay very careful attention to things that take you out of that zone and things that put you into that zone. And like being afraid and agonizing over all these details and stuff is really going to you're going to have a bad time. It's important to have a good time in the studio, So maybe that means, collaborating with one of your homies. Maybe, maybe it means writing songs about your cat. Maybe it means just like...
Or your ferret.
Maybe it means making like completely indulgent remixes of your favorite South Park song for a weekend or something. I don't know.
Or Katy Perry.
Or Katy Perry. Maybe you want to remix Katy Perry, It's up to you. So, really just like have fun, be your own audience and your own critic, your own judgment. Like, it's really, your music is about you and about what makes you feel good in the studio, what makes you like, oh, I feel fulfilled by this. Like, you might be writing totally fucking depressing music, but you're still having a great time in a way doing it, because it's like what you're called to do or whatever. I'm not saying you should write only happy music and you should be afraid of exploring negative emotions. Like, explore negative emotions in the studio. Although I will say that it's much harder to write happy music than it is to write negative music. It's much, much more of a challenge. But anyway, have fun. Make sure that it's a fulfilling, fun thing. And if you're not having fun for some reason, just, go around, ask your music friends and be like, hey, what's the most fun thing that you do in the studio? Can you share that fun with me? Don't say like, hey, how can I, make a more polished turd, or how can I, whatever, just be like, hey, I want to have some fun. Like, what do you find that's just fun? And get your friends to tell you about what's fun, and then try that. That's going to get you a lot further than trying to be perfect all the time.
Awesome, brother. Love it. Well, thank you so much, Dylan.
Cool. Anytime, man. It's great to be here.
One of our lead trainer with Warp Academy, Jake Perrine, has a saying, and he says there's people that know what they know and are masters in their fields, and there's people that know how to explain and convey what they know in ways that other people will get it. And you are both. And
he's not too bad at explaining himself either, It's not too bad, yeah.
Well, that's why we get along.
Cool.
And there's people out there who have that masterful level of knowledge, and there's a much smaller subset of people who are willing to completely openly share it without holding a damn thing back. And that's something that you, up to a decade ago, right at the beginning when I first met you, you were always willing to do.
Yeah, totally.
And you've always been so open and gracious with your knowledge, always so supportive of the people around you.
And it comes back, I've never been like, oh, that bastard, he made the new ill.Gates record before I did. It always comes back. Like, share what you know, have fun, and just share. Like, it's great. It always comes back. And I mean, you look at, like, a lot of the people who are truly at the top of the game, like, for example, like Sonny Skrillex. He is like the sweetest, nicest guy. He's like not jaded at all and will totally share anything he knows with anybody. He's super cool like that. And it's just like, you can tell that he's just like, he has a lot more fun, And like, I know other musicians who are like so guarded about things, and they're just fucking stressed out all the time. And it's just like, nothing's worth making yourself unhappy. Like, we, in our very privileged society, have a chance at real happiness, and to squander that chance because of just mental laziness, really, it's insulting to all the people who wish they had a chance to be happy. You know, like, be happy. You owe it to all the people who've had miserable lives to really like make the most of your chance on this earth. Like, you have a great chance. You're watching this on the most powerful tool ever created, and it's right there at your fingertips, literally. There's nothing stopping you from turning this video off and making a hit record, you know? So like, know that. Really know that. There's nothing in the way. Like, a lot of hit records are made with no technical expertise whatsoever. It's just someone who's like, you know what? This really, I feel this. And I think other people will feel this, so I'm going to share it. Yeah. And, you know, the simplest songs, like a lot of songs, there were huge hit songs were made as a joke, you know, like that Beastie Boys songs, Girls, was one of their biggest songs. And that was a complete joke, you know, and like the Rolling Stones were originally not going to release Satisfaction. It was just a jam of them in the studio. And like, if you listen to Mick Jagger's vocals on that song, they're completely different style than a lot of the other Rolling Stone songs. And, you know, they were just fucking around, and like it was not serious, you know. It was like a joke, and that ended up being one of their biggest songs. So I mean, really, just have fun, and you know that it's not like the ultimate technique is to have no technique. The ultimate style is to have no style, you know. And that's some Bruce Lee knowledge nuggets for you there. But that's really, nice. You know, it's not about technique, it's not about style. It's just about making people feel things with sound. So who's an authority on your emotions? Am I an authority on your emotions, or are you an authority on your emotions? You know, that's the question, right? So you're the one who's feeling it. There's no, you know, we could hook you up to every meter known to man and still not be able to tell you what you're feeling better than you can tell us what you're feeling. So feel something. Feel it strongly. Tell us about it. Use your charisma to make us feel that, right? That's what it is, not, you know, knowing everything about every processor and plugin and blah, 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 blah. Like, make us feel what you feel. And if we really feel it, your music will be a success. You know, it's that simple. It really is. So never forget that. You know, never forget that it is that simple.
Awesome. Well, you've been hugely supportive to so many thousands of people probably now, more than thousands. And you've been quite a community builder, and I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about what you're up to, the type of education you do.
Oh, yeah, totally.
I'm sure lots of you that have really resonated with what Dylan's had to say, and in the short time we've had with him on camera today, we've only been able to cover just a little fraction of the supercomputer that resides behind this.
Hopefully I've pissed at least a couple people off, too. I've
definitely pissed a few people off.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot more that love what you've had to say and are feeling inspired. So for those of you that want to check out what Dylan's up to and maybe go deeper into some of his training and some of the things that he offers for musicians, maybe you could just speak to that, how people could get involved.
The simplest way would be to go to ill.Gates.com, ill.Gates.com. And from there, you can not only download my entire discography for free, but there's also tons of different free Ableton packs and stuff that you can check out, a bunch of free tutorials. And, you know, you can connect with my YouTube channel. I have an educational site for my own stuff called the ill.Methodology.com. If you go to ill.Methodology.com, you can get there, and that's where, you know, I have templates and sound packs and tutorials and patches and mastering services, and, you know, if you want like technical feedback on one of your tracks, you know, I can provide that, all that kind of stuff. It's all basically available from ill.Gates.com, and you know, then I have like a groomed crew of other producers that I curate their music tools and help them to bring their music tools to people too. So it's not all my content, but ill.Gates.com and the educational sites that are associated with it would be definitely the way to get your hands on my music tools. And, you know, many of them are free. For those of you that do choose to support by buying my products or buying tickets to my shows, thank you very much. Seriously, thank you from
this
the
is
bottom
somebody
of my
you
heart.
want to support.
Yeah,
we vote every day with our dollars the types of people that we want to support in our lives. You could buy a couple of lattes at Starbucks, or you could support somebody who's genuinely giving and perpetuating awesomeness in our industry.
Yeah, I do really appreciate it. You know, you don't have to. I'm sure you can pirate all my stuff if you want to be a dick. But, you know, if you do want to support, you know, people like us, that's, you know, what enables us to buy the computers and cameras that it takes to get this knowledge to you. So, you know, thanks a lot. But either way, you know, come check it out. I'm sure you'll learn something and maybe have a bit of fun, because it's
A little
all
bit of fun.
about fun.
Nice. I like that. Thank you so much, Dylan.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Cheers, buddy.
All right, word. Lots of love. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a nice day.
Cheers.